And we cross now to Indonesia correspondent George Roberts. G'day there, George. Now, what's prompted these two boys to come forward at this particular time?
In Indonesia, called the Human Rights Working Group, has been advocating on behalf of these boys. They've provided them with support, with legal advice and assistance, and they've encouraged these boys about 6 months after they arrived back in Indonesia. They've managed to encourage them to come out and tell their story. The reason why they were wearing face masks and hoodies when they confronted the media was to protect their identity. They also took on two names of the president, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, calling themselves Susilo and Bambang to hide their identity. And effectively they've been encouraged to do this as a way of trying to prevent other people from getting in the same situation. So they're seeing this, the Human Rights Working Group is seeing this as a long-term strategy to try to encourage people not to take up these offers of going on boats for more than they'd normally earn, because it turns out to be too good to be true, as it has done in this case. They're also taking these boys and some of the other people who've been returned from prison in Australia around to these local poor fishing villages to try to educate some of the people working in those areas.
Now, what did the boys say about how and where they were recruited?
Well, these guys both come from really poor fishing slums. This is some of the poorest areas of Indonesia, and on some measures there are about 100 million, up to 100 million Indonesians on less than $5 a day. These guys come from an area where they could have been only earning $2 to $3 a day, which is below the poverty line. And they were approached at these areas by people offering them a job on a boat for much more money than they were currently making. One of the guys, he just wasn't sure about it. Bambang, the older boy, said that he thought about it for about a month. He wasn't really sure. Then they put a bit of pressure on him. They were saying that he could potentially earn $4,000, which is a phenomenal amount of money if you're on $2 to $3 a day. They offered him up front the equivalent of $50 or a bit over $50 Australian, and offered him this job to work as a deckhand on a boat. The other boy was in the same situation. He wasn't offered as much, but again, you know, they end up heading off to Australia and they don't see the rest of that money. So these offers did turn out to be too good to be true, but they really do come from an area where they are so poor that an offer like this just seems such a good opportunity to perhaps, you know, buy your family out of poverty or to raise your standard of living dramatically. And so that's why it is really attractive, and why we've seen a number of these people get into this situation.
So what's the strategy now from this human rights group? What's the next action they're planning?
Well, they're planning to pursue the Australian government, and they say that they want to prove that this abuse occurred, that they were subject to sexual harassment, sexual humiliation, and also the violence and intimidation that they saw in the prison, as well as the drug use as well. And so they say that the Australian government, by locking up minors for an extended period of time, for allowing them to be in this situation where they are teenagers in an adult prison and exposed to this for extended periods of time. One boy was not in there for 9 months, the younger boy. The older boy at 17 was in there for 12 months. So they want to pursue the federal government, they want to prove these allegations, and they say the Australian government's breached its obligations under the UN Conventions on the Rights of Children and for protecting children. So they might have a hard time proving it, but that's what they're threatening to do. That's the next step.
George Roberts in Indonesia, thank you so much. Corrective Services New South Wales says it was assured by Commonwealth authorities that the two males were 18 or over and that there is no record of the incidents. A spokesman for Attorney General Nicola Roxon says abuse of any kind is unacceptable and the claims need to be thoroughly investigated.